Hello and welcome to the Green 19 podcast. I'm Dominique Yates, joined as always by Ryan Wood and Tom Silverstein. Guys, I could tell football is back because I already saw a bunch of Fire LaFleur comments out there. Football's in the air.
After that first drive, I was searching my Twitter mentions to see if there was going to be Fire Jeff Hafley. Like, I was fully expecting it. Now, I'll give you credit, you Packer fan, that I did not see one of those. So there are still memories of 2024, but not a good start.
I don't know what people were doing without the blog because I would have been getting that all day long.
See, I got a few because like posting a lot of these videos like on the YouTube channel and as well as like on social media. I got a few on there already, and they said, "Oh my god!"
Did you really? You got him.
Mm-hmm.
You got him.
I did.
So the LaFleur. So okay, yes, people
did.
on my Twitter timeline or mentions or whatever you call it. X. It's not even called Twitter anymore. Right. X mentions.
Right.
We're upset with LaFleur.
Right.
And, you know, what? It's preseason week 1, folks. Like, we have no idea what's going to happen. I did not. Did you see any Fire Jeff Hafleys or upset at Jeff Hafley?
No, just Gutekunst and LaFleur.
Okay,
those are the two that popped up on the comment section when I shared those videos. So football is back, gentlemen. That's just kind of hilarious to me. But I will say this, you can't take a whole lot out of a preseason game. I mean, Josh Jacobs didn't get a carry. Jordan Love threw 5 passes. A lot of starters didn't play in this game. But I guess the recurring theme, and I'll start with you, Tom, especially just listening to these coaches and a lot of their comments and even from the players, still as far as like a standard of playing clean football, not making a lot of the mistakes and the penalties and all, it still wasn't up to, the standard that they're looking for. What did you kind of make of that first preseason game with the Jets?
Well, it was a lousy game. They weren't really prepared to match the Jets' enthusiasm. The Jets have a new coach. They're desperate to get off to a great start, set the tone in their organization with a new coach who's comes from the Lions, and we know how physical and intense the Lions are. So the Packers did not match that, energy. I think preseason games, I never look at it in the whole. It's always about individuals. And so you're looking to see how certain individuals do, guys who are trying to make the team usually. I don't put too much into starters or anything like that. It's really just about individuals who are being put out in front of all eyes to perform. And the coaches and GMs and scouts all over the country are looking to see which ones perform the best. So that's how I looked at it, why I don't really react one way or the other as to how the game went. Just that clearly the Jets had a better energy. They were eager to play this game, and the Packers looked like they were in week 3 or 4 of training camp or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that was what was kind of fascinating to me because we talked about some of the chippiness in practice between the players. So at least going into it, I would have thought, they would have been chomping at the bit to play someone else. But Spoon just kind of mentioned the Jets kind of dictated the game and how they wanted to play. I think, if anything, that was kind of just a surprising thing. Just, what did you see from, you could say, that little preseason game out there?
Yeah, I mean, the Packers looked like they cared about as much about preseason as I do, which is not at all.
Right.
So,
accurate.
I'm with Spoon. You don't make any grand sweeping claims one way or the other. I think Matt LaFleur said it today, day after the game, which I talked about last week, which is preseason's all about winning your one-on-one matchups. It's not about scheme. It's about your one-on-one matchups. The joint practice for scheme. Jordan Love said that after the game last night. Like, he's, looking forward to getting some schematic looks when they go down to Indy and practice against the Colts. That's not what the preseason is about. It's about one-on-one matchups. And as Matt LaFleur said, they didn't win. What do you say? Nearly enough, or the Jets had. I'll say they barely won any one-on-one matchups. They didn't win one-on-one matchups. That's what happened. So it wasn't good from starting level on down. There's plenty to get into from that. It was also preseason week 1, and I will not say that mattered at all when it comes to regular season, week 1 and week 2, week 3, and on fourth. So it was what it was. Zach Tom told me after the game, like looking back, like they weren't exactly ready to play, right? So I asked Matt LaFleur today if there was anything from that experience against the Jets that caused him to reevaluate how they're practicing. And he said no, they're going to trust their process. The process has been good to them in the past. They made the playoffs the last 2 years. He referenced getting a reality check in the joint practice last year at Denver, which was a reality check. I remember being there, and they got it handed to them pretty good. And they didn't really matter. They went on and won 11 games and were a solid football team. So I think that that's how they're looking at it.
Yeah. When we look at least on the offensive side of the ball, the one question that I was curious about going into this, obviously people will ask about, quarterbacks and receivers. I wasn't necessarily looking at that because it's going to be a small sample size regardless. But I was curious about the offensive line and how that was going to at least look through some of this preseason snaps together. How would guys kind of line up? And I guess the one question that I am curious about is they've talked about wanting to have depth at the O-line. And at least through this first preseason game, I don't know if that question is answered yet. What did you kind of see from that group on the O-line?
Well, there were a lot of mess ups and holding calls and things like that, but they were typically not by starters, and they weren't. The guys who are probably going to play, the guys who are really competing for spots. Jordan Morgan was pretty solid, had a pretty solid game. Jacob Monk did not have a solid game, but he's not really in the running to play. He's depth, but I don't even know if he's number 2 center or number 2 guard anywhere. Sean Ryan, that was a disappointment, I think. He didn't play very well at guard, and then he didn't play all that well at center either. That's kind of, that's sort of been his MO. He's up and down. He's a good player, but is he going to be a great player? I think he's vulnerable, and the Packers are going to look for someone who's more consistent, or hope that Ryan takes that challenge and becomes more consistent. But from a depth standpoint, I still think Anthony Belton's got enough talent. I don't know if he can be a starter right away, but you could see he could move people in the run game, and he's still a rookie. So I don't think there's a huge depth problem on the offensive line. I think if you get your 5 starters, if you have 5 starters and you don't have a weak link in there, then you're starting the season okay. You are going to need a swing tackle. You got to have somebody who can play swing tackle, because if your tackles get hurt, you're really screwed.
Which might be Jordan Morgan if Rasheed Walker comes back, or they might rotate. I think that you look at it, and if Jordan Morgan does develop or progress like they hope, and he had a solid preseason debut, that they have 3 solid tackles there.
Yeah.
The question is if there's injuries. No, as Sean Ryan goes, the MO on him has always been really solid in the run game. And the passing protection is where he needs work, and I think you saw that against the Jets. He gave up the sack fumble for touchdown in pass pro, but he brings it in the physicality department. I think you can extrapolate that to the entire offensive line. They were much better on the ground than all those miscues, the holdings, 4 sacks, five offensive line holding penalties. That was all in pass pro. That's where they struggled, really up and down. I mean, Jordan Love took the sack. That was kind of just a business decision, like, hey, let me just, fall on it here, because if it's regular season week 1, he might be, sprinting for the chains, and if he doesn't get it, he's going to get awfully close because there's a bit of a lane there. So I think that the pass pro was where they need to get better. That's concerning because if they have their best 5 out there like they did all last season, and they don't ever need to rely on that depth, then they're in good shape, because they're good at the top of the depth chart. They spent all this past offseason trying to build that depth, knowing that, the chances of having the type of health that they had last year are not all that high. It's hard to repeat that. If they don't, I think that the issues on the depth after spending the entire offseason working on your depth was the concern. And you got to get some – you hope that you don't need a Jacob Monk, but you might need a Jacob Monk at some point. And if those injuries start to hit, that depth gets tested real quick. So that to me is where they've got to be able to, through the next 4 weeks, really be able to build that up and get meaningful reps and snaps to those depth pieces in case they are called upon.
When you sticking with the offense and even just looking at just the makeup of wide receiver, I think they only played 4 receivers in that preseason game.
No Jaden Reed, no Dontavian Wicks,
no Christian Watson.
Obviously.
Yeah, and one thing that I think you even brought up the point, it was fascinating that Matthew Golden didn't play a lot of snaps, and you ask LaFleur, does that mean he's getting a better feel for the offense? Is he kind of maybe on schedule to where it's like, okay, we don't have to play him as much? What was his answer there, and what did you kind of make of that?
Well, just reading between the lines, I mean, he's a starting wide receiver, and they don't know if Jaden Reed's going to be available because he's got this foot injury, and they can't afford to have Matthew Golden. I was kind of wondering whether he was going to say, I'm not going to expose him when I've got another guy banged up. But really, they're treating Matthew Golden like a starter. I think we can assume that that's the case. If the season started tomorrow, it would be him and Dobbs would be the 2 starters. And the guy went out and he made 2 plays on Sauce Gardner, so that's not bad. That's a good start. Doesn't mean he's going to be an all-pro or anything, but they're clearly treating him like a starter. I think that's the bottom line. They need to get their depth there. To me, is a bigger concern than their offensive line depth. I mean, Malik Heath couldn't catch the ball. They're still having issues with catching the ball. McCole Hardman really hasn't done anything. Even Julian Hicks, who's had this great chemistry with Malik Willis, didn't do anything in the game. It just didn't look good. So, I mean, they badly need Reed to get healthy. They need Savion Williams, too. I really think that that's a guy they have a lot of interest in getting involved in the offense, and we didn't see him play at all either. Not that he's going to be a savior, but he's another guy that gives you some depth there. And I just thought they looked terrible at wide receiver last night, other than Golden.
I think as we've watched these practices, we've all kind of come to the conclusion that they're probably going to need to extrapolate or expedite Matthew Golden's development as quick as possible. They're going to need him, not just for the totality. They're going to need him like week 1. Like, he needs to hit the ground running early. Mm-hmm. And I think that you saw nothing against the Jets to make you think differently. If anything, it confirmed that they need to expedite this because basically if Jordan Love is throwing to Matthew Golden, good things happen. The third down slant, drawing the DPI on Sauce Gardner. Good things would happen if he was throwing to Matthew Golden and nobody else. He was 1 for 5. Yeah. He completed 1 pass to Matthew Golden. So they're going to need him week 1, regardless of the injury situation in that position around him. Even if they're fully healthy, they're going to need Matthew Golden week 1. Yeah. They need to expedite that. And then you fill out the depth chart from there. I mean, he's going to play early and often and be a big part of this offense. I'll be curious how the rest of the depth chart falls around him. I'll be curious if Malik Heath even makes the roster. McCole Hardman was a disappointment, not just for the punt return miscues, obviously catching one inside the 6 or whatever, and then the fumble, both leading to touchdowns. But also, he's made plays in practice. He's almost every day he's coming up with a play in the team periods. He did nothing against the Jets. That was a disappointment, I think, for them. So I'm with you on the depth, but bottom line is that Matthew Golden had better be ready to play early.
Yeah, that is so true. And even you brought up Hardman. He had the drop right before the strip sack as well, didn't he? So just so many moments.
Yeah, that was a first down, and they're out of that out of the shadows of the goalpost if he can hold on to the ball.
Yeah, I was surprised. Like, we talked about him being the experienced guy, had some big moments in games and played in Super Bowls, etc. But through the first preseason game, it just wasn't there.
But there's a reason he's a free agent who got a minimum wage contract.
Yeah.
He's not wasn't brought in to be their number 3 wide receiver. Right. They brought him in to see if he could help on special teams, and if he can add something at wide receiver, fine. But he's just a fast guy.
I mean, his Pro Football Reference page will tell you that they should not be expecting much from him at receiver.
Right.
He hasn't done much at receiver for a few years now, and I think it'll be very interesting specifically how he responds, because he is a guy, and Rich Bisaccia referenced this. Rich Bisaccia said he's a guy that's got some skins on the wall in this league. He's made some plays. Obviously, one of the bigger catches in NFL history if you consider it won a Super Bowl. I mean, he's made some big plays in this league. So Rich Bisaccia also said that the disappointing thing with the punt return miscues is that in practice he's been the one telling the young guys, don't do exactly what he just did against the Jets. So, I mean, he knows better. If he responds and he finishes out the last 2 preseason weeks well, he'll put himself right back in that favorable position, but he's got to do that.
It also shows you his mindset, which is he's got to do something to make the team.
Yeah.
He's not going to be given a roster spot. So he forced it both times on the punts to try to make something happen, and it bit him. I do want to say that I think when we're looking at the receiver position, we almost have to include the tight ends because, Kraft is going to could be their leading receiver this year. I don't know. He's going to be right in the top 3 for sure. Mm-hmm. And I honestly think, I could see them keeping 5 receivers and 4 tight ends. I could see Fitzpatrick looks like he's kind of flashing a little bit,
nice catch.
in the pass game.
He plays all the special teams.
Yeah. Ben Sims can run.
Yeah.
And then Musgrave. So, who knows? It may be that until Christian Watson comes back, they just go with 5 wide receivers, or they won't go with 4, but they'll go with 5, and a bunch of guys are going to be out in the street because of it.
What do you make of? They are playing Malik Heath like they are really wanting him to make the team. Like, they are putting him out with the starters. He's got a ton of first-team reps. He's with the starters in practice, and he has not had himself a camp here, but he keeps getting opportunities. What do you make of that?
Well, he's got talent. They love his blocking. He's perfect for their run game. I think they want to see whether he's not the best at avoiding mental errors. He makes a lot of mental errors. He runs wrong routes. He doesn't run the routes exactly the way they should be. Mm-hmm. I think they're testing him, and they're trying to figure out whether to keep him or not. And this is his moment, and he's got to come through.
Yeah, so that's going to be – that's the one thing more than anything with so many of these guys. I'm curious of just coming up this week in Indy with the joint practices. Like, will there be any differences? Will it be cleaner? What will the preseason game look like? It's just a lot of questions that I'm just curious from that week-to-week basis, just how they'll approach it.
We should mention Matt LaFleur said today that going into the preseason, his plan was to play starters against the Jets, rely only this week on the joint practice against the Colts, not play them against the Colts, and then joint practice against the Seahawks in the final week and play the starters in that final week. Now, he did leave himself the out. Basically, if the Packers go to Indy and the joint practice goes the way that it went last year when they went to Denver, then he's going to play the starters this week. If he feels like, okay, they got it handed to him again. Mm-hmm. If not, if it's a favorable practice, if he feels good about the work, he won't play the starters this week in Indy, and then he'll go about the plan. Because I made the mistake of, Matt LaFleur said that, he wasn't expecting to play him this week after the game last night, and I made the mistake of saying, so he said last night you're going to shut him down for the preseason. He's like, no, I didn't. Mm-hmm. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
This week. I'm like, okay, this week. And then he said, so that's the plan right now. But like most things in life, it's open to change.
Yeah, I didn't think he would play any starters on weeks when they had joint practices. I mean, that's how a lot of teams are doing it. If they got a joint practice, they're playing their starters. If not, I would be really surprised if he played them this week. And then, I guess the last week it depends how much he uses the starters in the joint practice, because that's also a time when it's cut down time and they have to make their final evaluations, and that third game is usually, that's when they let all those other guys play. So we'll see. All that stuff was up in the air, but yeah, I'd be surprised if he played guys.
I kind of just assumed that they were done for the preseason. That's why I asked the question the way I just kind of assumed that, right? I mean, if you're not going to do it this week, you're going to do it the week after. That's 2 weeks before week one. What if there's a significant injury then? I mean, preseason week one, there's 4 weeks. You can understand that logic. Do you think it's a more of a likelihood that he changes his mind on playing his starters against the Colts or not playing them against the Seahawks?
I think he doesn't play him this week, and then he makes a decision on Jordan Love in week 3, and he can play the starters with Malik Willis. He could play the offensive line for a series or 2, but the decision is on Jordan Love. Does he really need to play him? Is it the other guys who need to see the speed of the game and everything like that? Does he give Love a ton of snaps during the joint practice and then hold him out of the Seattle game? I think that's kind of what it comes down to. Also, how many injuries do they have at that point, too? They're starting to lose guys.
Yeah.
So
behind Jordan Love, I think maybe the most fascinating decision there might be Matthew Golden for week 3 preseason, right? I mean, he is, at this point, a starter, but he is also a rookie.
Yeah.
What do you do? And if Jordan Love's not going to be on the field, then does Matthew Golden be on the field? Because he's going to be catching from Jordan Love.
I think he got great experience in the game against the Jets, but I would continue to play him. I know it's a risk. You don't want to get him hurt in the preseason, but you really need him to come out flying in game 1.
Yeah, that'll be something that will be interesting to monitor. But just watching him on the field and just seeing how he just even watching him going up against, it's like it was Sauce Gardner. Like, that's how you're starting in the NFL in preseason, who is a quality guy. So it was just at least a step to kind of build off of for him. So we'll see what happens moving forward. I do want to move to defense a little bit because, I mean, the theme on coaches, I don't know how much it's cliche or what, but like, Hafley kind of talked about he wasn't pleased with how they talked about trying to have turnovers and trying to be aggressive with the ball. He said it didn't necessarily translate into that first preseason game. Again, there weren't, as many starters and, they didn't play them as long. But when you watch the defense, was there anyone in particular, guys in particular, that you were monitoring a spoon before they took the field, and what did you kind of see?
Yeah, I watched a lot of Isaiah Simmons during the game, and then I watched the tape of him afterwards. I watched a lot of Teron Hopper. I wanted to see how those guys played. I meant to watch more of the defensive line, but I didn't get a chance to really study that. I was watching the corners a lot. There was a lot of up and down plays. I think I saw what it is that confounds people about Isaiah Simmons. All that athleticism, and then I'm pretty sure he's the guy who blew that play to Anthony Beck across the middle.
He did.
Just dropped the coverage.
The wrong way, yeah.
Someone got confused and dropped the coverage. And so I think, it's just one play. He also missed a tackle. That is what you have to evaluate with Isaiah Simmons. He looks great in shorts and
getting off
helmet
the bus,
and even in practice to some degree, but in games, is he going to be a playmaker, and is he going to blow coverages? So anyway, that was one of the things I saw. I was really, really impressed with Kalen King. I just think he's had a great camp and has come out of nowhere for a 7th-round pick from a year ago to playing slot corner, which is not an easy position. And he's physical. He was active in the run game. He broke up 2 passes in the end zone. He tackled a guy short of a first down on a 3rd down play. I wonder if he keeps playing well, whether they'll elevate him a little bit and put him on the field a little more. Maybe, who knows, maybe Bullard gets a little more time at safety and King gets a little bit of time in slot. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess a lot depends on how Hobbs comes back.
Yeah. For you, though, same question. Was there anything in particular defensively you were keeping an eye out on or you were curious to see and, kind of how it translated?
I mean, so much of this to me is just going to come down to that defensive line's pass rush.
I watched them,
We didn't see enough of the starters to make any type of real evaluation on that against the Jets. But obviously, I mean, did they have a sack? I don't think they had a sack up front, right? No. So and that's just winning your one-on-one matchups.
No sacks.
So.
No sacks. I think they might have had a hurry or two.
A hurry or two. The one guy that I'm beginning to become interested in and really curious about his development is Barron Sorrell.
Yeah,
I think he had two quarterback hits.
Yeah,
and we've seen in practice that every once in a while he can flash some pass rush. He is a 4th-round pick, so patience there. I mean, he's not a guy that he's not the 12th, 13th overall pick in the draft. It's not like he's going to be the great savior of the pass rush. But I've seen some things there, and I'm curious how that might progress. I think Brenton Cox has had a solid camp, and so that Kingsley Enagbare might have been the best player on the defensive front. And so those are 3 depth guys on the edge. That's a good sign. We didn't see enough of Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness to really make much of anything. They're going to have the Packers absolutely need those 2 to be good this fall for their defense to be good. Like that's got to happen. So, but the depth of behind them, there's enough there for me to wonder. Okay, can that develop, and how is that going to unfold? Bottom line, they didn't have any sacks. They're going to need sacks. They're going to need pressure on the quarterback. I'll be watching that the next 2 weeks and see if that starts to grow.
Yeah, I was watching a lot of D-line in that preseason game, and like you said, I watched Sorrell being active. They were using Warren Brinson out there to see what he could do. Nazir Stackhouse, they've really been high on what he's done out there so far. And I know it's early, Spoon, but when you watch a guy like Stackhouse, do you feel like he's a guy that, like, the coaches are high on, maybe he can kind of fill that hole with no TJ Slayton now, or do you feel like that could be another guy?
No, he's not. I don't think he's TJ Slayton yet. I think he's got a good shot at making the roster. He's a good size guy. I think he does have a little bit of pass rush ability too. But yeah, he could be a backup guy at the nose, I suppose. Kenny Clark's going to be their nose tackle, and then they're going to play. They're going to play so much nickel that they don't necessarily play with the classic definition of a nose. They do sometimes line the guy up as a shade over the center, but Stackhouse, when he gets to the big boys, to the Lions and the Eagles, we'll see how he stands up there. He did okay. I also saw him get driven off the ball on double teams. You have to learn how to handle double teams. We'll see how much he can help them. I think Colby Wooden's going to help them this year. He's just a smart player, and he finds a way to get through blocks and slip through blocks. I don't know that he's a great run player, but I think he's good enough. And if their linebackers are playing the way they hope, then they might be okay. I don't know about, but again, like you said, pass rush is what we're going to have to find out.
I think the Packers want Nazir Stackhouse to potentially be that TJ Slayton replacement. I think they see him as a guy who might be, and just the way that Jeff Hafley described him today in terms of his strength. He said he's a big body inside. He's 6'4", 327. TJ Slayton was 330. I said it this spring. When they lost TJ Slayton, they lost something there. I mean, he was the absolute anchor of a very stout run defense last fall. He didn't give you anything in pass rush, but in terms of that run, he anchored that run defense. So they have had that need to find someone who can do that. I have no idea when, as Spoon, you said, when they get to the big guys in the Lions and the Commanders, and it's for real. I have no idea how he'll do there. I have no idea if he'll be ready to play or not so early in the season. But just because of what the vision is for him, I think that there's a very real chance that he makes the 53 because I think there is a vision there for him.
Yeah. Last point, I guess, with the defense, I guess we're kind of making our way back as far as with the safeties. As of now, without Xavier McKinney, they lost Zane Anderson during that preseason game. I guess what are you looking there? Is it more of just like the Evan Williams leadership from now, or Omar Brown? What are your thoughts on?
You got to see Evan Williams start to make some plays.
Yeah.
I asked Ryan Downard about it. Last year he was making interceptions like every single practice. He was all over the place, and then I don't know. He might have won this whole camp. Is that about right?
I think that sounds right.
Yeah.
So now with McKinney out, he is the leader. He's the main guy back there, and it's time for him to flex his, or spread his wings, whatever cliche you want to use, and start to make some plays. So this will be a good opportunity the next couple weeks to sort of not have his security blanket next to him.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier McKinney is. Makes up for whatever mistakes he makes, or helps him. Now he's got to fly on his own a little bit. So let's see how he does.
And there is no question that when you look at that opening series against the Jets offense, not having Xavier McKinney on the field is a game changer in itself. He's that Packers defense. He is the eraser. He's everything that Jeff Hafley in his very first introductory press conference, defense coordinator, described the perfect safety. He fits all those checks marks on the list. So not having him makes a huge difference. They need him to be healthy.
Yeah. Finally, we can talk about special teams a little bit. Well, Daniel Whelan was very active in this preseason game. Brandon McManus made his field goal, and that was the one thing, too, during this preseason. You're just getting to see different guys, like in the return game. Saw Izzy Abanikanda back there a little bit. Just saw some different guys just trying to work with the special teams. But as far as I'll start with you, Spoon, just the operation from the kicking, the punting, I guess what did Rich Bisaccia kind of say?
I didn't really see anything, noticeable. The kicking, punting looked exactly the same to me. Saw Isaiah Simmons play a gunner.
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot to report on that. I thought on the kickoff returns, Abanikanda was impressive. I kind of wrote in my 3 things to watch that he was a guy to watch at running back, but I should have said he's a guy to watch on kick returns. I didn't even know he was going to be their main kick returner going into the game. And it's funny, he got cut by the 49ers during camp or right before camp, and the 49ers just lost a running back and they had to sign the guy off the street. So this guy's got some talent. I don't know how you can keep him just as a kick returner, though. He's going to have a game. Remember, we talked about one back is going to have a great preseason. He's going to have these great numbers. Amar Johnson is that guy.
Yep. I'm thinking Rajon Neal.
Everybody wants to know who Amar Johnson is. Well, get to know him now because you're not going to know much about him once the season's over. But Abanikanda is not a rookie. He's not an undrafted guy. He's the guy was, I think, like a 2,000-yard rusher at Pitt.
Yeah, he's successful.
He could carve himself a role if he can show that he can run the ball. And he's got to catch a screen, that was thrown. He's got to be better than that. But averaging 29.4 yards per kick return is pretty good.
Yeah. Josh Jacobs was really high on him, too, in the locker room. He said, quote, he's got something there. So we'll see what that is. So that, again, we even talked about it, last week in the pod. He's one of those guys I'm curious to see when he gets some pads on, how he responds. And like I said, through that first preseason game, did some good things.
I'll say he does have to do it now because when use air quotes, Marshawn Lloyd comes back, they're going to force feed him. They got to find out about him.
Yeah.
And so this is his moment. The one thing you saw, Chris Brooks was the lead back, and there's just not much there when he's not going to break anything. He's solid. He can block. At some point, you have to make the decision: is it better to keep him, or is it better to keep a guy like Abanikanda who knows? Maybe he can wind up being an effective runner.
I mean, they're so different. Like
completely different.
You have to think of Chris Brooks as a fullback. Like that's what he is.
Yeah,
He's
Chris
a great
Brooks
blocker.
is a fullback.
Best blocker.
And Matt LaFleur likes fullbacks.
Yeah.
I think Matt LaFleur liked Chris Brooks, the fullback, last year. So if Matt LaFleur wants to keep a fullback, and Brian Gutekunst is going to, cater to the head coach and the offensive guru, then Chris Brooks makes the team because he's a fullback. I don't think that he necessarily has much to do with Abanikanda's future with this roster, because it's, do you want a fullback or not? Yes, no, then you move on to the next decision.
Yeah, it often comes down to fullback or fourth tight end.
Right.
So what you're going to do, like Fitzpatrick, I saw got used in the backfield a few times.
Yeah.
Fullback. So they're trying.
Could he do it? Right.
Look
That's
at him.
yeah.
You're right. Is he as good as Chris Brooks? He's not going to pass block. He's not going to be the third down protector guy. But Abanikanda has to force them to say, look, we can't waive this guy because he's averaging 6 yards a carry and 30 yards per kick return. So this will be a big week for him, I think.
It will be. So as we wrap it up, are there any final words or anything you're curious about with the Packers and Indy, or for you, maybe you're going home? But you got anything?
I thought Malik Willis would play better than he did, and I don't think he played great. I think he was off a little bit. There were always some circumstances. The one time he faked the handoff and looked to throw to two guys, and they're the two wide receivers, and they're both blocking. He called an audible at the line, and they're both blocking, and so he's got to, tuck it in and then run. He got sacked because of a bad block. Mm-hmm. But he also, there were some guys who were open, and I didn't think he played great. So I think this week he needs to show a lot in Indy.
I mean, the passing numbers in general were just anemic.
Yeah, they were bad.
Was it 59 total? Like 59 total yards?
Elgersma was their best quarterback by numbers. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
What, Jordan Love had one completion. None of the top three had a passer rating above 60. And it wasn't just on the quarterbacks.
Wait, Elgersma was 89.6. Oh, you said top three.
Top three. Yeah.
That's true.
But good fact check.
That's right.
It wasn't just the quarterbacks. I mean, there were protection issues. There were receivers blocking instead of running routes.
Yeah.
There were drops. So it wasn't just the quarterbacks. But, the worst snap Jordan Love had all night was airmailing wide open Luke Musgrave down the middle of the field. I mean, that is a 30-yard layup. And he just, it was the quarterbacks too. And so the rushing numbers were fine. And when we talk about the offensive line, and what have from Brian Gutekunst, John Eric Sullivan, what has the front office said all offseason about this offensive line? They wanted to be more physical. And the rush numbers would indicate that the physicality was there. The passing game was just a mess. I mean, it's got to get better.
Yeah, so that's more than anything. If just in this next preseason game, even in the joint practice, just how clean will it be? Will there be any rhythm at all offensively? Because there was no group yesterday in that preseason where there was no rhythm. There was no flow for either quarterback or just any group that was out there. So that's something that I will be interested in when they head to Indy this coming week. And yeah, I think that's a good place to end it. So again, you ready to go home?
It's home.
You excited?
Yeah.
For the people that's going to Indy, what's on the checklist? What should they do when they get there?
Oh, you got to hit St. Elmo's.
Yeah.
Best steak you'll ever have. It's great. St. Elmo's Steakhouse, phenomenal. It's where Peyton Manning would always go after Colts games. I'm not from Indianapolis. I grew up an hour north in a cornfield, out between Marion and Kokomo. But yeah, it'll be nice. I'm taking the boys, my sons, with me, and they'll be at the practice. They'll be at the game for my 11-year-old twins. It'll be their first ever Packers game. So it'll be fun. See the family a little bit and hang out. I'll be staying with my best friend from high school, so it'll be a nice homecoming.
There you go. Well, we'll get to hang out in Indy. We got a road trip.
St. Elmo Steakhouse, boys.
What about Primetti's?
Permani brother. Not Permani. That's Pittsburgh.
That's Pittsburgh.
Yeah, but isn't there one? I think there's one in Indianapolis.
It's called. No, it's not Permani's. I can't remember. It is a deli. I know what you're talking about.
Oh,
Hey,
you're thinking
Steak
of,
and Shake.
You're thinking of Shapiro's.
Steak and Shake is
but
good.
Isn't there a Primetti's in? Okay, I'll have to look.
It might.
Yourself-
I'm thinking
get
of
yourself some
Shapiro's.
cheese fries and a milkshake at Steak and Shake.
Steak and Shake. Okay. No. No.
My dad's a big White Castle's cheeseburger.
Oh
guy.
yeah.
That was my
that's
jam in
his
Louisville.
yeah.
They were like on every corner when I lived in Louisville. So once a month, you can't go that much to White Castle. It's like a once a month, once every other month.
Oh,
place you
it's
go.
basically a heart attack in a bag.
Yes,
but
it is.
it's addicting. It
Good
really
fries,
is.
though.
Yep.
The fries are good, but the
It
onions.
ain't no Culver's. Culver's is better.
I agree, but the onions, the smell, and after it's like Taco Bell. After you eat it,
In fact, all right. So here's let's end with a hot take.
Do it.
Okay, a little Culver's hot take for you. So we travel the country in this job. We've eaten about everywhere, and the big three are Shake Shack, are Whataburger, and In-N-Out. Right? I'd put Culver's with those three any day. In terms of quality fast food, Culver's is second to none. It doesn't get talked about nationally, but in terms of quality, second to none.
It's pretty good.
It is good.
You need to try Cops in Milwaukee.
Okay.
It's old time custard place like Culver's, but their burgers are like you can't get in there on a summer night. You have to wait, and the whole parking lot's packed. And you should try that if you're really into custard and burgers and fries and that kind of stuff. That's the Milwaukee spot.
Okay.
Try that.
I know I'm gonna add that to my list.
But
I like
anyway,
the whole-
I do like Culver's.
Get yourself a butter burger. I go with the cheese curds instead of the fries, and I get that double cheesecake mixer.
Ooh,
Just
you ever had
load
it?
up the cheesecake.
Heart
Cheesecake and
attack
ice cream is
city,
amazing.
dude.
Yeah.
That
Well,
is
I'm not going to live all
you
that
are
long,
a
but
Wisconsinated.
I'm going to
You
enjoy it. I've been indoctrinated here in Wisconsin.
You
All the
are
dairy.
no longer a Hoosier, that's for sure.
I've been here long enough.
Yeah, you're going to start saying, oh, yeah, here very soon. So
Oh, yeah.
get ready. All right, guys, let's wrap this up. And we thank you all for checking out the Green 19 podcast. Again, the Packers are in Indianapolis this week. Another preseason game taking on the Colts. So for Ryan Wood, Tom Silverstein, I'm Dominique Yates.